Okay, thanks for joining us for our end of May TELedvisors Webinar. Today we're looking at engineering serendipity, how to establish oneself as a node in a network of creativity. So Hans Tilstra is going to, along with Ian Thomas and Sheryl Maher, lead us on an overview and a bit of a demo of a tool that could potentially be used to support collaboration by way of visualising yourself as a node on a network. So, and explain a little bit about what this might mean for learning designer and TELedvisor roles, and then also how it might work with students. So I'll put it over to you, Hans, if you're happy to start.
Thanks, Kate. Okay. Kate and I sit very close to each other. We discovered through this process that we have a shared interest that we didn't realise. Similarly, I've worked with Ian, who's a research engineer. Is that a fair description? And we discovered a similar interest. Then one day, Sheryl and a colleague of mine walked past my desk and saw a visualisation. Said, "Oh, that looks really interesting." And so gradually we've been joining forces to explore what it would be like to operationalize connectivism. I think we often talk about connectivism as an abstraction, but I'm in my role very keen to see what that looks like. So my interest in this is I'm concerned about education being too transmissive, too much about watching PowerPoints and not enough about doing stuff together. And so I'm very interested in how you make that happen. So that's my and throughout the hour, I think you'll get a better sense of what I'm talking about. Ian, do you want to just introduce yourself as well?
Right. Hopefully, people can hear me. Hello, I'm Ian Thomas. I'm from the e-research office here at RMIT, and my role is to help researchers and people at RMIT with advanced ICT roles. So anyway, here's my face.
Notification.
So I've become part of this project in order to help with some of the visualization and the graphics and the graph representation. So I'll be showing some of that stuff a bit later on to see what's possible.
Okay. And Sheryl's just signaled that she's happy to be introduced by my colleagues. I want to move on. I want to give you a sense of how, we've got an hour, I've got 5 minutes, and so I've got 6 milestones that I want to accomplish. The first one is I want to clarify why you'd be interested in this and what's in it for you, really, to invest, to pay attention to what's going on. Then I want to spend some time on the how of how do you make this work, the component, the tools of the trade. I want to spend at least 20 minutes on one of the metadata sets, and that's the folksonomy of learning designers. And finally, I want to see your views on this. And the complexity of this is that this is a meta idea. And so a meta idea is an idea that generates other ideas. So this is big. The vulnerability of this project is this, as someone once said, one person can't build one house, but 20 people can build 20 houses. And so this depends on the numbers to be a success. And that makes it exciting and vulnerable. So my first point I want to make is that I think that we often don't know quite how well we know each other, and I think that it's quite hard to find one another and know what interests we've got. Some people are very good networkers and they know an awful lot about people, but I've often felt, particularly at large conferences or even at a large organisation such as RMIT, that we tend to have quite light impressions of each other's skills. And in sharp contrast, in the business arena, people know an awful lot about us. So I was reading an article this morning about that the enormous amount of data that's that's extracted from your iPhone or your Android phone during the night, where people are trawling through data to try and find out more about our buying preferences. So if you look at Facebook and Amazon and LinkedIn and Netflix and Google, they're often very good at leveraging data. And quite frankly, we are not. I don't think that in learning and teaching design we're halfway there. And so this hour is really about jointly exploring the potential of leveraging this kind of platform data in learning and teaching. And it's Uber is quoted. We had a Provost Chancellor, and he was asked what keeps him up at night, and he said, "Look, I'm concerned that our university will end up being the yellow taxi in the Uber world," and I think that that's a very powerful metaphor to consider, and that's why I think we should explore this. Not so much talking about stuff, but experiencing it ourselves. I don't know whether anybody's familiar with in the researcher arena. There's universities are starting to adopt now Elsevier's fingerprint engine, and one of the reasons why Ian's so involved in this work is that researchers are generally quite good at interrogating co-authoring articles, co-authoring data to connect with one another, but not so much in learning and teaching. The key quote that absolutely mesmerizes me is this one from MIT's Joichi Ito, and his point is that education isn't about centralized instruction, but it's this process of establishing oneself as a node in a broad network of distributed creativity. What do you think about this? Is this something that resonates with you? Is this something that you have a view on or a concern about? What comes to mind when you think about this, both as a professional or even as a student? Say that you want to do project-based learning in entrepreneurship or research clusters. Exactly, yes. And yes, and I think, like Jill points out, this is the whole idea behind an effective community of practice as well, such as this one. Part of what we're hoping to do today and start is for you to experience this, and it's an ethical concern I have. I've often felt that I'd like to do adventurous things with my participants and students, but I would never ask a participant to do anything I'm not comfortable with doing myself. And so I think before we try this out on students or conferences, my invitation to you is to try this out in this Escalite community, so that you can make a really informed choice about what are some of the implications. This should be very thought-provoking stuff, like what is it like to become a node or a series of nodes, and does it work? Is it worthwhile? Does it enhance your creativity? Does it engineer serendipity? Now, the 4 people that are involved so far have tested it out so far and have found that there's something about using these algorithms that helps. So you're not being guinea pigs here. You're sort of experiencing second iteration or third iteration of this experience. The second reason why we think this is worthwhile to explore is that we need to improve our findability. That findability is our ability both as professionals. How do we make ourselves findable? I think the Escalite is a classic example of a vehicle to improve one's findability, but I also think students need to make themselves findable. So I want to go on then to the next step. This is a picture of Ian Thomas illustrating the work we've done of the network visualizations developed earlier. He's got some very large screens here that show both examples of outputs in two software. One is called Kepthi and the other one is called Neo4j. And the proposal we have for this hour is that we experience what it's like to identify relevant nodes. How do you put yourself on the map? Not just as an individual, but also your areas. So we often talk about our areas of interest. And so the proposal is that that we use 4 types of nodes. The first one is the Dewey Decimal Classification call numbers, the DTC23. The second one is your fields of research. Now, first response I get here is that I'm not a researcher, but we do. Kate, sorry, do I need to? Is there a question? No, okay. So the second one is the fields of research, and the third one is the ANZIC, which is a set of nodes about where you say, well, what industries have I worked in? What industries have I got experience with? The reason we're choosing these 3 is that they're very robust. They're all 3 hook up to other data sets, and there's something for everyone. I would find it very hard to imagine that you have any field of interest that couldn't be captured by a series of Dewey Decimal call numbers. And generally speaking, we find fields of research is another very robust data set. We tried some other data sets as well, but we found that these 3 provide a really good background.
I might just pop in just so that we can kind of consolidate what's been happening in the chat before we move on to the next section, because it feels like we're probably at a point where you're going to move on to demoing some things.
Yes.
Just to note, especially because it'll be recorded, and we can then have this on the video later. A few things that people have sort of mentioned. Michael Sankey raises the point that his networks are really important to him and have been incredibly helpful for giving him a sense of place and space in the sector. And one thing that I sort of, I guess, Hans took us through this process in our learning designer community of practice at RMIT, and I could see a lot of potential in the work that we've been doing in trying to define the third space in our TELedvisors SIG here, and just in terms of, I guess, mapping our skills, mapping our research interests, trying to connect to other learning designers in the field who have similar research or project-based interests. So trying to find out, well, who might be good to actually tap on the shoulder for things. So that's where I could see the potential for this. Jill kind of mentioned a couple of things that LinkedIn does some of this already, and she had another point about the fact that it sounds like the ideas behind the community of practice, but bringing in ideas from data analysis. Tom raises a point that which I guess is an opposing point, that how hard can you be to find? That if you've got a profile on social media and some papers, then it's not hard to be findable. So I guess you might want to briefly clarify what's the difference between being findable versus, I guess, what you might use this for in terms of, or maybe we can open that up at the end, just thinking about, is there a difference between being findable versus, I guess, being able to identify people with specific sets or specific.
Yes, I think there's a reciprocity there, I think, about being findable and whether you trust the data enough, and do you trust the process enough, and how do you generate trust in this to make yourself findable and sharing what I'd consider to be sort of need to know. I think Hank is making an interesting question about overnoding. How much data is enough, and at what point does it become too much? One of the things we've learned is that more data is better and more diverse data is better. So at the end of this PowerPoint, I'll share some of the research findings on this, where diversity of data is very important. But there is a technical problem that if you have similar kind of nodes, that you end up with a data ball, just a whole cluster, a whole messy way in which everyone's clamoring for the same area. Looks like in Neptune, in Neo4j. And the other point that Mike's just making about drillability is that the problem we have is that at the moment we're going to share but it's more powerful if you use the actual software itself that has those algorithms where you can click on a particular cluster and it'll highlight a particular area. And so that's a dilemma about and that brings us to the ethics as well. Say that we'll put together data, we share that GEPSI file. But what kind of consent does that require?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. It's an RMIT specific question, but is this linked in at all with the RSTP project? And I'm sorry if that doesn't mean anything to anyone else. Because part of RSTP is establishing a neural network of researchers and academics, and this seems to be aligned with that.
Yeah, I could probably talk a bit to that as being part of RNI, which is the group that's running that project. And yeah, they're actually concerned with the idea of building links in terms of publications and impact for research. That's the most, and they have a big database which holds all our publications, all our grants and everything else at RMIT, and they're building networks out of that. And I've actually done some work on that as well. It uses a similar technology to what we're talking today, but it's a different data set. Here we're talking about the relationships between people in terms of interests, as opposed to just simply, did you publish this or did you publish that?
Thank you.
Good. I'm just going to go to the next slide. So I'd like to share this particular image with you, but unfortunately it doesn't actually move. Anyway, okay, so one of the reasons why researchers are so interested in this, and why I guess Ian's also been tasked with interrogating the research data, is that often that's a source of innovation. That's the idea of connecting ideas and saying, what are the, how do you, if everything is a remix, what is it that you need to remix? I want to go to an ethics concern, and that's that there are two different approaches to ethics. One is, and it's a very popular one, is that you are enticed to buy a product and then people draw you in and trawl through your data. Another way is to trawl through your LinkedIn data and to base it on this. This experiment is about, what if you start with a clean slate? What if your data is designed to be deliberately fit for purpose? So that you choose the metadata that is as useful as possible for this particular purpose. That's hard work because often people look at this kind of work and they go, "That's a great idea, but I need some low-hanging fruit." The proposal is that we show you in this seminar how you efficiently identify node data that represents your area of interest, and show you a little bit about what it would look like once that data gets combined in these different algorithms. The proposal we have is that we, at this point, you don't submit data, but that you consider this and say, am I in or am I out? At some point, we will then open up the Qualtrics questionnaire for you to actually provide the data with the ethics consent that we require. The proposed shelf life is something that we probably need to discuss, but I would think the proposal is that you have a chance to revise your data. So my ideal would be that that you enter data, then you have a look at the depiction of it, and then you might go, look, it's like others represent ideas that I haven't thought about, or I want to just underplay some of my areas of interest because it's not relevant for this particular community. The outputs of the data so what I've put on this screen, as you can see with all the red nodes and the blue nodes and the beige nodes, is a sample of output where 4 people went through the Qualtrics questionnaire, the drill down questions, and they generated this particular depiction. As you can see, there are nodes in the middle, and as predictable, these are fields of research of the 1-300s. They are the Dewey Decimal Call numbers of 370s, which is education, and so forth. So this is our common ground. And then you can see that there are people who go into different directions. So some people have a social science area of background, some people sciences, IT, engineering, and so forth. The prediction is that if 50 people enter their data, that you create a landscape of knowledge, and that this is what's called grounded research. When you do grounded research, you have a phenomena, you look at it, and then you go, well, what does this tell us? And so there are numerous things that you can extrapolate from this. One of them is the dimensionality of a skill set. So say that you have 30 Escalate participants and you get a whole lot of data together, you start to get a sense of common ground and also what they call intellectual turning points, bridge particular nodes that seem to be particularly pertinent. I think this is best experienced by joining in. So I'm proposing that we now, before I do this, are there any concerns about ethics? Any questions you have that I shared this with Kate, my colleague, and she said, look, we share stuff on LinkedIn, you know, so one of the most ethical components of this is that you decide how you want to be represented. So, and just to clarify, just to build on Kate's point, we'll spend some time testing out the Qualtrics questionnaire, but the opportunity to properly enter data and to be part of a larger map is more likely to occur in perhaps 2 weeks' time. Okay. So I think it's time to go to the questionnaire. Now the hyperlink, the 13117, here we go, excellent. Okay, so in the comment section, you can see that Kate's just shared the link to the Qualtrics in here. This is the visualization, sorry, okay. So first we'll have a quick look at the visualization. So if you click on the link, you can scroll down and you can see 2 things. One is the link to the survey. And second, if you scroll down, you can see the example of a graph. Excellent. Okay, can everybody see this? Excellent, good. Okay, so as you can see, this is one of the outputs of the data. If you scroll down on the page, you can see that there's a brief explanation that we're trying to develop a map of expertise of people, and as you can see, there is a link to the survey. So I will click on the survey, but I'm wondering whether you can as well. Excellent. Okay. So we've got a 7-page survey, and what I propose we do is we just we test this out. So have a go at these drill down questions. So you select an area. I'm at RMIT. I'm a dual sector, and then you're asked to classify your work here, describe your areas of interest. So here's a brief explanation. Let's go to the first one. So using the drill down questions, we're using the Dewey Decimal Classification System, and this is in 3 steps. So for example, my main group is in the social sciences, and my professional background is in education, and I specialize in higher education. And in that, I have led projects. So as you can see, the for your above responses, what is your level of expertise? What this provides is gives what's called weight to your node. So you might have nodes where you say, look, I've read about this, and then you'd be would have a light node, or you might say, I've led projects in this cognitive area, and then it would be seen to be a heavier node. Then you have an opportunity to add more nodes. So you don't have to just represent your area as one Dewey Decimal call number. And so if you click yes and hit the red arrow, then you have another chance to represent yourself, for example, in technology. And you might say, my interest is in technology, education and research. So, any comments or questions on this drill down process? Because we reiterate this process for the other two metadata sets as well to create to put you on the map. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. So the next drill down question in Qualtrics uses the field of research, in which you choose first of all the large overheading. So I'm in 1300, curriculum and pedagogy, and then you choose a field, and I might say that's my area of interest. I've published in it, or I've contributed to projects. And then, so that's the field of research. Like the Dewey Decimal classification, you're welcome to go through this 10 times. I'll just check with Sheryl. Is there a cap on the number of times you can? 20. Okay, you can, if you want to, you can put 20 nodes in the field of research area. I'm going to move on because this is where this is for demonstration purposes. Okay, so the third section is what industry have you worked in or with? Now, I think that when you work in learning and teaching, you typically work with subject experts. And so you trawl through a field, then you choose a subdivision, and then you might, and that's one way of, an efficient way of getting through the nodes. We've tried this different ways. We had workshops where people trawled through large A3 printouts of these metadata systems, and it was just too clunky. So again, you can enter 20 different industries if that's who you've that you've worked with or are in. So you give yourself more weight if you say, look, this is my background and this is where I put in projects. But if you say, look, I don't have an educational background, but I work with educate, then you might rate that somewhat a bit lower. Okay, now the second stage is the folksonomy. And so this is open-ended. What we're after here is your particular areas of interest. So I'll give you an example. I was working with Kate and she said, oh, I'm really interested in e-portfolios. And then that would be a topic that you would add folios, folio, comma. I've got a particular interest in project-based learning, and so forth. So this is a brainstorm where you enter the data. The final stage is the consent page. Are you happy for these findings to be presented in research? Or would you prefer that they're not used in research? You're more than welcome to try out the process, take note of it yourself for maybe future purposes. One of the trends we're finding is that people often start to represent themselves, not so much qualitatively, but they start to list a whole lot of nodes in their public profiles. And would you like an opportunity to update your data? I tend to find it's useful to have a chance to revise this and say, look, I would change this. And the second question relates to consent. And then you enter your email address, preferably your work one. Okay. Good. Okay. Oh, whoa. Okay.
It'd be a good point to maybe get some of the questions and things that have come up.
Excellent.
Is this a good point, Hans? Yeah?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, great. So, so I guess one of the key kind of queries or concerns that came out was around. Actually, I'll put my video on just so people can see me. There we go. Hi, everyone. Was around, I guess, the idea of whether it's trying to capture your current state versus an aspirational state. And so, so I guess we've kind of left it quite open, but I guess my question back to the group would be there's that weighting idea, which I guess I've struggled with that in that for me, you know, leading projects versus having theoretical knowledge. I think there's sort of an assumed weighting that one is sort of worth more than the other, and I kind of, I don't know, for me, I kind of grapple with that because, you know, like, I mean, sometimes I've done both, and sometimes I have deep theoretical knowledge, which I feel is probably just as weighty as project leading, but that's me. But I guess whether or not that accurately captures interest, because you know, so I guess having a think about whether the weighting captures interest well enough, if we, you know, if there's a sense that we want to use it for aspirational points, then accurately reflect people's interests rather than their expertise, I guess, for want of a better word. So that was something that came up. So it'd be good to, I think, maybe push it back to people to see if it supports that. Another question was, maybe we'll leave it there, and I'll clear up some of these questions. And ask the group on that.
Yep. I think it's a good point. I think that in the research culture, we often have to promote ourselves, and here the purpose really is, if you put your node on the map, would you like to be approached about this? Do you have time for this? If someone finds you and says, I'd like to talk about basket weaving. So if that's an area of interest, if you've put yourself on the map, then that's the logical consequence, is you're going to be approached and may join in, and you may be asked, you may, I would think that in the learning and teaching culture, we focus not just on our past but also our aspirations. So I'd be really good to reflect on this and to experience this experientially. Give it a go, put in some notes and say, this is my area of interest, this is my area of expertise. It's not intended as a marketing tool. It's really intended as a matchmaking tool. And with that in mind, what nodes would you want to? How would you want to be known? Do you? So by all means, put in something that you have curiosity about. That's your next mountain that you're going to climb.
Wendy, a question about, you know, what if a TELedvisor does not have a field of research? I think people who don't do research or would like to do research, but aren't necessarily given the opportunity, and so don't necessarily think about themselves in that way. And you know, we've sort of talked a bit about that. You know, my view is that I mean, I come from a background in film and TV, and so I still look at that and go, well, I've got skills in that area. I'd be quite happy to have those identified. Therefore, I still see that as a field of research. But I don't know, what are other people's thoughts?
I think my 10-year-old daughter does research. I think we're doing research right now. I think we're using a mode of inquiry. I don't think it's with a capital R, but I think that we are here to investigate the learning and teaching space, and so I think that you're picking up on sort of a modesty that's prevalent in our community, in our tribe. Just picking up on Tom's point, where when you fill in the form, it doesn't provide you with input. The initial output you get is a PDF that gives you your answers, and then time is it. So there's no immediate connection with the data. Doesn't interpret it, and cleansed a little bit as well. So that's why we haven't. We're not able to. It's not at this stage. It's not that well advanced. Once we have the kind of money behind this that Uber and Netflix have, we'll. I'm sure this will evolve and become very sophisticated.
So are there any other kind of key questions at this point? Otherwise, it might be worth talking about the folksonomy, because that's come up a little bit as well. I'll just open up if anybody does want to ask another question around what we've been talking about now, just before we move on to the folksonomy. Feel free to put your hand up and take the mic if you want.
Yes, and so Cheryl's just shown a. Oh, sorry, Peter.
Hi again, thank you. It's all extremely thought-provoking. A question that comes to mind, excuse me, because I'm particularly lazy, is that would it be worth looking at, for example, using a specific folksonomy that we could all put into our LinkedIn profiles so that you could use the LinkedIn search and filter functionality to find people using that folksonomy rather than creating a separate database? Sorry to be the devil's advocate, but I am very, very lazy.
I think it's a great idea. One of the comments was that someone went to their LinkedIn profile and just cut. So Tom went to LinkedIn and provided like 12 different keywords from LinkedIn. Another thing we've got is that I've just found LinkedIn's full list, and if I don't know how people find this of interest, but it is possible to unpack the LinkedIn areas of interest in a similar way to the drill down questions. So you go through a larger list and then you pick from that, which would be of interest. We had a discussion about this, and one of the discussions was that there's so much data we could ask for. We could ask for who are the gurus you draw on, who are the people that inspire you, whose thoughts are you, whose shoulders do you stand on. Another possible metadata set would be what tools are you using, and would that be useful to have on the map? And then you can take off tools once they sort of become a bit dated and put new ones on. If you're saying, you know, I have a colleague who's told me about smart sheets, and so maybe smart sheets would be something you could put on the map right now, and then in 3 years' time it will be quite people will be quite au fait with it. Now the thought we had was that we would use the questionnaire to generate some word clouds whilst we're in that form. I'm just checking with my colleagues whether that's okay. So excellent. All right. So we've got a folksonomy that we've prepared earlier. We used word clouds in this one. Oh, they're developing it now. Oh, okay. Excellent. All right. All right, so Cheryl's just going into Mentimeter to show you what's being produced live. Whilst we're doing this, are there any more questions so I was hoping this would be a thought-provoking workshop. Are there any more comments or questions people have about what we're talking about here, what you want to be on the map and what you want that map to be used for?
I wanted to raise the point. You had some of those other folksonomy lists that you were talking about at one point, Hans. It might be useful to show those lists. I mean, I'll leave that open for questions for a second. If people do have any responses to what you want to use it for or what you want to be known for on the map. But otherwise, it might be worth showing those lists while Sheryl does her bit.
Yeah, so one of them is the the LinkedIn list, and I think it's really important that we think hard about the metadata we choose, because often metadata can be can provide really powerful links. I'll give you an example. At RMIT, we were developing reading lists, and so one of the things that reading lists generate is Dewey Decimal Call numbers. Okay, so are you able to see this word cloud on the screens now? Excellent. Okay, can we all see the?
Did you ever?
Can we all see the word cloud?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Peter, did you have a question while?
Yeah, sorry. Just to fill in the gap. Again, falling back to my lazy person mode. What if we could have a way of importing our LinkedIn profile into a machine that spits out a number of suggestions for the Dewey Decimal classifications and tags, rather than having to go back and rethink? Maybe there's some machine learning that could be run over all that LinkedIn data to come up with a series of suggestions.
I think this is all very true. I think what this requires is quite a large number of people who have energy for this and an interest in this. I think when I started, I said, look, one person can't build one house, but 20 people can build 20. I look with such envy to these commercial businesses that seem to be spending so much money on fine-tuning algorithms and connecting data sets in ways that you hadn't thought about before.
I'm happy to jump in and roll my sleeves up to do some stuff. I'm not academic or a researcher at all. I come from the corporate world, with specific focus on consumer marketing. So that drives a lot of my philosophy. But I'm happy to come into RMIT and talk to you folks about some of my ideas.
I think it'd be great. My sense would be that this Escalite community itself would have people with quite a lot of expertise that could be drawn in somehow, and I wonder what that would look like.
It'd be a scary monster.
Yes. Now the plan we had was for this. So the discussions now goes towards that LinkedIn would be a good source of metadata to create your folksonomy. Is that what is that the view?
Sorry to interrupt again. Yes, I think that's a good view, because that's where people tend to spend a lot of their time on their public profile.
Okay. Now,
could you see?
Excellent. Can you now? Now you can see the. Thanks. Thanks, Kate. Okay. So here's one we prepared earlier. So just to clarify, this is. Let me just zoom in. How can we zoom in? So Sheryl, can you just clarify what the origins of this one are?
So what you see on your screen now, I'm Sheryl, I'm the other researcher in this who was trying to be silent. What you can see now is the words that you've all been putting into Mentimeter. And so the idea is that this list may become what you search on when you're filling in that question, so that when someone, rather than using a drill down list like we are for the other types of metadata, this one is just an ordered list. It's alphabetical, and you kind of go, yeah, I'm pretty good at flipped. Yeah, I'm pretty good at storytelling. Oh, analytics, yeah, not so much. I'm not going to tick that. And so just so that if you're trying to decide what words to use, you've got a little bit of a vocabulary provided for you, so that we pick up on the consistencies and the similarities, rather than someone using flipped and someone using pre-reading and someone else using different things. So it's this idea that this folksonomy is giving us the vocabulary and the consistent language on how to take this forward. And so the data that you can see is just all those words that you've been popping in today. Obviously, that are more common, such as feedback, are bigger than other words. And so it's just the frequency is determining size.
Yeah, Wendy's made a note that she thinks the cloud format can sometimes shape, potentially shape where people will, go, rather than allowing for people to put in new words. I think it's useful to have. I think we talked about potentially generating a list, which is, I guess, a similar idea. For me, I think there's still, you can still put in, new things. I think, it should be flexible. I guess it's more just that if you have, say, ePortfolio, for example, you could spell it with a hyphen or without a hyphen. And so if you want to get consistent language in order to then be able to, accurately generate, there are, 20 different people who have put that as the same folksonomy tag, then it becomes easier to deal with it. Whereas otherwise you end up with multiple spellings of the same tag. So I'm using the term tag just because that's kind of how I view it. But yeah, so I guess we just thought it was a way where we couldn't sort of capture everything in the survey, and it was an easy way that you could enter in additional data without it being too laborious, and also that it could be sort of iterative and generative over time, and that it's open enough that it can continue to grow. So it's not sort of set to these, unlike the other data sets where they're sort of quite locked down in that sense. Have I accurately captured that, Sheryl?
Yes. Now, I can share an example of what the LinkedIn files could look like, but I might need some help. So I've got a spreadsheet here. I can't add a file. How do I show this file? That one, that's it. Okay. All right. Can you all see this now? Okay, so this is an example of the LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has both a skills group classification as well as a link to ISIC. You can't see this? Yes. So as you can see, one way, and this goes to not having to reinvent the wheel, is that LinkedIn provides a skills group, and you could trawl through that arguably and say, look, I'm okay. So I need. Sorry, guys. Okay. Exit. It won't allow you. Okay. All right. So as you can see, here's an example of a data set where you've got an international metadata type called ISIC4, ISIC, and this would allow you to link that to a LinkedIn industry name. I don't know about you, but on the one hand, this is quite overwhelming in the sheer amount of data, but on the other hand, it really boils down a very large amount of data to something quite controllable. So LinkedIn has, and I don't know what the copyright situation about this is, but as you can see, for example, if someone wants to develop a resume, they might say, look, I'll identify the 3 or 4 skill groups that are relevant to me. And then once I'm in that area, I'll drill down to something that's relevant to me. So if my background is in aerospace engineering, I might, so if I work with space engineers, which is very topical at the moment, or aerospace engineering, I might tick that one, and agricultural production. And then I go, look, here are some detailed skills, airworthiness or animal nutrition that boil down from that. Can I just get a sense, is this the kind of metadata you'd think would be useful to draw down on to put on the map as a way of representing your area of interest and for others to find? Oh. Sorry, okay. All right. Sorry, we're okay. So Cheryl's disconnected. Provided the update. So Ian has managed to use the existing data that people have provided to put more people on the map.
Do you want me to bring it up?
Yes, please.
So the idea was that rather than actually disclosing who people were, we put coded data into the system. You can choose to out yourself and identify which node is you. Or you could choose to remain anonymous, because some people want to be known, some people don't want to be known. And this just allows you to have that opportunity to pick. So if you've entered some data, you can go in and have a look and see how you connect. You don't know who is you. And the idea is that in the future, when you've given us your email address, we will email you and say your code is. And then you'll notice that all of the codes start with 19. That's to indicate that this data was entered in 2019. If you come back and update your data next year, you'll get to keep your single digit identifier, but you'll become 2001 or something like that, so that you can continue to update your data as you wish to.
Yeah, so at this stage we're having
If you would like to know what your code is, please send a private message to Ian and he will tell you what your specific code is. So in your chat, if you take the back arrow beside everyone and then type in Ian Thomas and send him a message and he will chat it.
Yeah.
Private chats on that.
And it's causing a bit of confusion that there's two Ian Thomases at RMIT. So this is ian.thomas2 at rmit.edu.au. That's it. I think it's because it's now 5-1, so I think we're on track. I was hoping that we'd spend the last 5 minutes over the brief discussion about the meta nature of this. So there's a meta amount of data needed for it to be powerful. I think with 4 participants or 5 participants, we can just touch this. We can start to have useful conversations. But I was wondering about the 27 people that are currently sort of involved. What meta applications do you see? Do you imagine that? Well, can you imagine this working at a conference or for students even? What's the potential you see? Do you see this?
Mentioned mentors, which is a great idea. I love the idea. Wendy's mentioned TELedvisors group and then per unit for co-design. So that's for uni for co-design. So if you're co-designing with, I guess, say library staff, or you might decide to get another academic teaching staff in to help co-design or review a course or subject that maybe is in their area. Could be another way. I like, we've talked about the idea of using it for conferences, so that if I was at, apart from ASCOLAD, I think if I was at HERDSA, particularly if I wanted to do research between myself and other learning designers, but also with academics, or decide on a project that was, say on a portfolio, sort of discuss this sort of thing. I could actually get people across areas to co-work on things, which makes it easier for research or for projects if people for not just different, but just different, professional and higher ed staff, I think, or professional and academic. Elaine said looking for PhD supervisors as an option. Cheryl's mentioned fellowships. I quite like that mentoring option that Peter's mentioned as well. I think that's a really nice idea, and that's where it might be useful to have differences, a bit more of a delineation of interests versus expertise, for want of a better word. So that people up in that way. So, and then Penny's mentioned building a knowledge management expertise directory. So, which is, I guess, similar to some of the things that we've talked about, in that institutions have a habit of wanting to skills map people these days for sometimes for restructures. And with this method, it's a ground-up, community-led approach rather than somebody else deciding what your skills and you know, I keep saying expertise because I can't think of it, but you know, I mean, you know, somebody else mapping what your skills are.
Yeah, and I think that's the ethics concern about this, that if now I'm mindful that it's 2 minutes to 1, and what I'm hoping for is that we can follow this up with an invitation to contribute to the data set, to go through the Qualtrics questionnaire once we have the ethics approval, and I'm wondering what you think about that. Scope, that sounds interesting.
So what just in terms of actions, because I'm noticing it's 1 minute to go. I think we can put something up in a couple of weeks. Once ethics is clear, we can put it through the discussion forum, and maybe look to do a follow-up shorter session at some point as needed. If you do have questions, there's some information on that survey link, as you see there. There's Cheryl's listed. If you do have comments or questions, then I think we can start up a discussion forum channel, and that way, if people have suggestions, especially around the survey itself, that would be great. Just wanted to thank everybody for attending, and also just to thank our presenters, Hank, Ian and Sheryl, for demonstrating a network visualization tool and how it might be useful to TELedvisors.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you. I'm just going to stop the recording now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.